Welcome back to the convention floor here at PAX Prime, and of course behind us the amazing stage for the North American Regionals Finals. I'm MonteCristo from ggChronicle, and joining me once again is Jatt from Riot, who is a QA, you're a live balance designer. What's your official title, Jatt?
I'm game analyst on the live design team.
Great. So let's talk about your former team, Dignitas, who's been doing really well since coming back from Korea. As much as they are your former team anymore, the only people who are left are Skara and Cutie Pie from when you played on the team. So are you psyched to see how well they're doing? They look pretty dominant in their games against Team Dynamic.
They look really, really strong today. I was a little surprised because they had such a poor showing in Korea. It seemed like they just kind of appeared there, then lost in the group stage. But I was talking with Skara earlier, and they were actually practicing more in Korea than anywhere else. Over in Korea, they could ask for scrims any hour of the day and get them. So they were practicing 5-on-5s, 8 hours a day. Now that they're back in North America, Skara says, it's way harder to find scrims. Some teams don't wake up until 6 p.m. People leave in the middle of it. It's just a different environment right now, and it's not quite up to the same point. But they've taken that practice, and even though there's been a lag time since they've come back from Korea, it actually looks like it's paid off a lot because they were dominating in their 2 games today.
One thing I noticed, Optimus Tom and I were casting the Dynamic versus Dignitas games last week, and Dignitas, something I've noticed is that they are so smart about their team compositions and picks. They are so strategic, and I noticed that Dynamic actually picked the same kind of triple threat comp of Olaf, Aurelia, and an AD carry. It was Graves this time, it was Corki last week, and this time we saw Ryze and Udyr coming in, which both build into Frozen Heart and Randuin's kind of naturally, so we saw them kind of picking the champions that itemize well into slowing down that comp. What is it, having been on Dignitas, can you explain some of the composition and team comp and pick practice that you guys go through when you're in a game? Who is making those calls? Who develops the strategies?
Well, I can tell you right now that Skara is most likely leader of that team. He will generally have the last say on everything they do now. For a time that was actually Locust, but now that he's gone, I cannot imagine it's anyone but Skara. He has the most insight into matchups in mid and pretty much ever on the map. He probably studies the game more than the rest of the guys. And one thing that Dignitas does that kind of other teams don't is they'll think about items in their team composition, like who can build Frozen Heart? Who can build the Abyssal Scepter? How can we get all these ore items? If I tried to do one thing when I was on Dignitas, I tried to get people to love the crap out of ore items, and I think it worked. They're still doing that today. Not taking credit for it, but I'm saying I might have a little bit of influence, and they do that when they're picking teams.
So we saw I Will Dominate play Udyr the past couple weeks. We haven't seen that since you played Udyr really on Dignitas. So how do you feel about Dominate's Udyr, and where do you think he is? Because not many people are playing him in the jungle right now. So both as your kind of opinion as a pro player, but also as somebody on the live design team, what are Udyr's strengths? And if you're looking to buff him at all to get him back kind of in the active jungle role, what would you do?
So Udyr's actually remarkably powerful if he can get close to people and if he's not getting kited. So when things are strong in the game, like if Malphite has that persistent slow, if Janna's seen a lot in supports, especially if Nunu's in the game frequently, Udyr can't necessarily function. He gets slowed down too much. He needs to get in melee range to do anything. So when Dignitas picked Udyr, they made sure Nunu was off the board. They had him on his team. They knew the other team wasn't picking Janna, so they enabled him to run in, be a huge tank, soak up the damage, and when he's allowed to do that, he's still exceptionally powerful. It's just we probably haven't seen as much of him because there's been so many stacking slows getting played.
Very great answer. So much. I mean, if we think back to PAX East, that was like 6 months ago when we last had a chat, and one of the quotes you said was that the kind of era of the casual professional gamer had ended, and it was now down to all these teams that were really buckling down. And in such a short amount of time, we've seen this scene really explode. And now you guys have announced the Season 3 with the player salaries. So let's start at the kind of beginning. From your perspective as a former pro player, if you were here today, how would you feel about Season 3 and being a part of Dignitas if you were still on the team?
I would be incredibly excited, but I would also be super, super stressed. At least when I was playing, even the lower tier games, I was getting stressed out. Like I was not doing well in a lot of ways. So the pressure for these guys is really, really high. Some of these guys haven't even had full-time jobs before, but now they're making careers as professional gamers. They're interviewing on stage in front of 200,000 stream viewers. They're playing and running out in front of 1,000 screaming fans. Like, it is a ridiculous step up in pressure for these guys, and it's tough for a lot of them to handle it, and you can tell the difference between good online teams and good LAN teams is still pretty vast. It takes a while to get hold of these things and really become good professional players. It's crazy, crazy exciting because I didn't think that we'd be able to convert into making professional gaming kind of a cool thing in such a short time. I was talking with someone earlier who's trying to organize pro tournaments, and he has cards that he gives out to some parents. Parents come up to them and be like, so my son wants to become a professional gamer. What do you need to give him? And he tells them about things. Well, you want to make sure he has a good computer because he needs a good video card. You might want to upgrade your internet so he needs better ping. And it's just all these things that parents, kids, everyone's actually starting to get behind it. And we might actually be growing a generation of competitive gamers, which is quite possibly the coolest thing to ever think about.
Wow, that's really awesome. It's really fun to hear that kind of story. So now that you've transitioned into being probably one of the best known analysts in the game, and you're really like coming up in your shoutcasting career, and people really like you. So how exciting is that kind of, now that you work for Riot and you're working on the live design, and now you're casting a lot, and I assume we're going to see you a lot in Season 3 in LA, how do you feel about coming at it from that angle? Because you kind of did a 180 and are now, observing the games and talking about them rather than being the one on the stage.
It's actually a really interesting transition. I try, when I cast, to teach someone about the game. I try to phrase simply the more complex ideas. If I can't teach someone something during a game, then I've kind of failed, in my opinion. So I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to just educate the player base. I'm trying to make everyone a little bit better, while obviously trying to keep the game exciting. As for coming in from the live balance perspective, it's actually fairly difficult. I've been out of the office for like 2 weeks now, so I'm missing out on some of that stuff currently, but it's still a balance between the two. I want to keep doing both, but I don't know if I'm going to have the time to, with the way just our balance is progressing, as we need to step it up for Season 3 with more and more money on the line and more professional teams. And just the level of competition and the amount of production we're throwing into these things, you need to put an immense amount of time into both. So I really have to pick one pretty soon.
Speaking of your live balance work, the tournament here at the North American Regionals is being played on the Diana patch, but Diana is banned. Now, we recently saw some nerfs to Diana in the player beta environment, public beta environment, excuse me. That patch isn't live yet, right?
I think it actually did go live last night or the night before.
Sorry, guys.
I'm jet lagged, I'm done, so I do not blame you.
Yeah, sorry guys, if we're a little confused about this. Jatt and I were in Raleigh last weekend for casting for MLG, and then we both kind of immediately came to Seattle. But anyway, we've seen some Diana nerfs. Whether they have gone live or not, we'll leave that to the audience. But when you released Diana, she was seeing a lot of action, and in the tournament she was played in, notably, was OGN in Korea in the Azubu Blaze versus Azubu Frost game, where to me, that kind of came down to who got Diana and Rapid Star in mid. So what were your goals for Diana as a character? Obviously you wanted her to be able to jungle, but it seemed like that her ability to jungle made her super strong in mid lane. So what were some of the steps that you kind of took, and what did you look at to nerf with her, and where do you want her to be in the future?
So these are obviously kind of my opinions. It's the whole team that works on Diana. I know Volti was the original designer of her, so I can't speak definitively about what his goals were, but I do know that we wanted her to be a jungler and a mid. And when we were balancing her, I think unfortunately we put a little bit too much effort into balancing her jungle. So things like her base health regen, the values on her shield, the proccing of her passive got a little bit rigged, mainly the damage of the Q, because it needed to be able to clear the waves, and we underestimated her ability to be an AP mid carry and actually snowball games. There's a few things about Diana. If she doesn't get far ahead, she actually really falls off in team fights. She really is a couple spells burst, and if that doesn't work, she falls off. So she's fairly razor thin for bounce. We did accidentally overshoot on her. She's doing too much damage. She was jungling actually probably at the point where we wanted her to, but the mid was too strong. So that's what we ended up taking down in the last patch. As for getting seen in Korea, not entirely sure what's going on there, but at least for the North American tournaments, we might be getting into a pattern here where we don't allow the most recent champion from the patch in the tournament. Not even necessarily because we can't balance it, but because it doesn't give teams enough time to react to the counterplay of that champion. It's unreasonable to expect them to master a champion in 1, maybe 2 weeks, especially master playing against that champion, and it's just going to be better for the competitive growth of the game if we do that, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a great step for Riot to take. So I want to wrap up with a few minutes of discussion about some of the games that you weren't casting, but I know you saw all three, which will go down as probably some of the most notorious games of this tournament, with CLG versus Legion. Now, those were some really wacky games. CLG played a strategy that we'd seen them use before in OGN in the group stage against CLG EU, and that strategy was promote mid with the support and AD carry. This time, however, instead of Caitlyn Nunu, it was Sivir in that mid lane for that spell shield, which is even better better against the kind of AP carry that you typically see in mid lane. First game it worked really well, but I think the real story is game 2. So what did you see as adaptations from Legion? Because I noticed a few things that they did to try and counteract the teleporting and everything like that. So what do you think were the biggest keys for them as they came back to take that second game?
Really, when someone's trying to split push around on you, when they're trying to split you up, when they're trying to put a lot of pressure on your lanes, it's all about being able to catch people out of position and punish them for not having 5 people together. Legion had Malphite Gragas, and every time you'd see them flash initiate, flash blow people out of position, and really just move around. The range on Rumble Ult as well can extend up to close to 3,000 in a lot of ways. So they had a great pick mobile comp, and it was a crazy quick adaptation because they got absolutely rolled in game 1. CLG played a very similar strategy in game 2, and it got turned around on them, but seriously, that game was ridiculous. I remember at one point, Hotshot, if he would have waited about a second longer to cleaver the Gragas going back to base, he would have interrupted them, and then Sivir and TF would have been able to push through to end the game. But he missed the cleaver, didn't run in time, Gragas got back, double kill, split push, just absolute madness, and that was one of the most exciting games I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was a great base race, guys. You could check out the VODs. They're probably going to be up tonight. Yesterday's VODs were up last night, so they get up quick on the competitive site at leagueoflegends.com. Also, another thing that I noticed that they did was probably decided to take something very non-standard, which was teleport on Gragas to kind of follow gg's TF around. And I also noticed that they picked Blitzcrank. Now, I really didn't like their Soraka support pick. This would be Legions in game 1 because it's too easy for a champion to 1v2 against them without an aggressive support. But that Blitzcrank actually forced Double Lift and Choster to leave mid and go back bottom because they were zoning out Voyboy so completely with that combo. So, and also they were running other teleports as well. So do you think there's anything that, besides the missed cleaver, that CLG could have done to make that strategy work?
There was so much that went into that game that I'm not really sure. It seemed like it was slow, but there was so much moving around the map. I think the main thing CLG messes up a bit is they scream when they communicate is one of the things. So a lot of times players' calls get overridden. Hotshot goes, go, 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 much louder than that. And then Trouster will be saying exactly the same thing, but no, 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 no. I still don't feel like they have a totally clear shot caller, so when chaos erupts, it's really down to the individual in a lot of situations. And that's going to be trouble when they try to pull off these incredibly complex team-based strategies. They were really close to doing it right, but you could tell there were some hiccups there.
Yeah, that strategy in particular is so high risk, high reward, because if you don't capitalize early and knock down those towers, especially in game 1, we saw Legion running an extremely solid late game, end game comp with Maokai and Vladimir. I'm trying to remember who was their mid champion in that game. It was another AoE monster. Zyra. They were running Zyra, and that combo, had Legion been able to hold on through the laning phase, would have done some serious damage in teamfights late. But CLG played it at first really expertly. And take down those early towers. Now, what do you think about Hotshot's Jungle Cho'Gath as a live designer? I've noticed the Jungle Cho'Gath really has problems unless there's hard CC in lanes. What's your take on that champion?
I think he's a really strong jungler as long as you have things to combo his crowd control with. You land the Rupture into a silence, that's close to 5 seconds of disabling someone if you time it properly. But Rupture's still, despite its improvements, still fairly difficult to land on a moving target. So I like the choice by Hotshot. It's just a matter of having to combo it well.
Great. Well, I think it's about wraps it up. Do you want to say anything else about Riot Season 3 coming up? Anything that you're super excited about? What is the most exciting thing for you about Riot Season 3?
Really, the most exciting thing, and we touched on it earlier, is just the legitimacy of esports as we move forward and how kids see it as an aspirational path, as parents are getting behind it, as the culture comes up around it, and people build their days around watching esports. That's cooler to me than anything else.
I know it's going to make my life easier in terms of covering it when I don't have all these different events at random times, so I'm super excited about that. Anyway, it's been a great time, Jatt. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
I'm MonteCristo. With me has been Professor Jatt. Going to be analyzing some games for you for the rest of the weekend. You can check out more interviews at youtube.com/ggChronicle and check out our live coverage all weekend at ggChronicle.com. Thanks a lot.